Palestinian Authority. To her right, Tatiana Molsian, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And to the very right, Nigar Göksel, Project Director of the International Crisis Group in Turkey. So, Minister Mիրзоյան, as you mentioned in your speech this morning, the title of this year's Yerevan Dialogue, Navigating the Unknown, couldn't be more fitting. As the previous panel discussed, the US, one of the most important actors on the world scene, has become completely unpredictable in its foreign policy, and the EU is scrambling to rise to the immediate need and the use of the window of opportunity to fill the vision of European sovereignty with life. From your point of view, what are the most important challenges that Armenia and the region are currently facing?
Well, hello once again, dear friends, dear guests, and thank you very much for this interesting question. You know, dear colleagues, dear guests, sometimes we, public figures, politicians, journalists, we, during our public appearances are supposed to, and I think this is a big secret, but everybody knows this secret. We are supposed to have the very serious expression of the face and express some clever and complicated ideas. In this case, to answer this question, I'm going to come up with very simple answers because, you know, usually the truth is very simple. And the simple answer in this case, I believe, is that there is huge demand for peace in the world. Everybody is fed up, everybody is tired of, and everybody is exhausted with the wars, be it in Ukraine, the suffering in Gaza, I don't know, the war that we have, and the conflict that we have seen here in South Caucasus and elsewhere. So what makes us a little bit unique, and I'm very sorry for this word, is that in our case, in case of Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict, we have made already tangible steps towards establishment of peace, and it's the agreement, bilateral agreement upon the text of draft agreement, that draft peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I very much hope that everybody would agree that this is a huge accomplishment, and we are ready to sign this agreement and then eventually, of course, ratify, which will open an era of peace and cooperation in South Caucasus. And coming also to the title of this panel discussion, this model probably, hopefully, could also be exported to, I don't know, of course, every conflict is unique, there are nuances everywhere, but the approach, the general aim to establish peace and then open an era of cooperation and peace could be exported to Ukraine, to Middle East, to some other regions which might be needing intervention. And I want to remind all of us here, our colleagues, politicians, governments, members of parliaments in the world, our final aim and our obligation is to create an environment where our citizens could build their happiness, their livelihood, have better education, better healthcare system, and of course the other things too. So we must act as we are obliged. We must create this environment. First of all, peace and security. I can, of course, elaborate a little bit on the benefits that the peace could bring. For instance, we have been speaking about the crossroads of peace, the establishment of transport corridors here in South Caucasus, unblocking of transport infrastructure here in South Caucasus, mainly between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And we all, if we just have one look at the world map, we can see that unblocking these communications here in this region could connect Europe with Central Asia, but I mean, these are evident things that I don't think there is much necessity to speak about from this panel.
Minister Barrot, moving on to you, looking at the likely window of opportunity for the peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia, but also on the impact on security and stability in the region. Is France, is the EU doing enough to support its partners in the region?
Well, first I'd like to thank our host for this second edition of the Yerevan Dialogue. with a fantastic program and amazing speakers that has certainly become an outstanding venue for discussions on peace, security, and regional integration, and which speaks of Armenia as a very central place in this region, a place where solutions are found and new cooperations are created. So thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. As for your question, I will start with where Ararat left off. I indeed think that there is a great aspiration for peace, but peace cannot, does not fall from the sky. Peace requires that a certain number of principles are followed. The first of which is a very simple principle based on which we drafted the UN Charter 80 years ago, that has not prevented all wars and crises around the world, but that has avoided many of them from degenerating into major regional crises. And this principle is very simple. I don't touch your borders, you don't touch mine. I respect your territorial integrity and your sovereignty. And once this principle is established, as we've established it across European countries, members of the European Union, well, you have a solid building block based on which you can develop prosperity through regional integration, through infrastructure, through connectivity, and so on and so forth. But the first building block is indeed the respect of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And yes, we look at South Caucasus as a major region to connect the European Union to the East and to the rest of the world. And that's why we want for peace to be achieved between Armenia and Azerbaijan, not only because we have a very special and long-standing relationship with Armenia, but also because it's in our interests. And that's why we've supported the Armenian authorities in their efforts to come up with a peace plan. That's why we've supported the political agreement on this peace plan when it was reached a few weeks ago. And that's why we're calling upon both parties to now sign and ratify this treaty, so that based on this regional peace, we can build a future of prosperity, regional integration, and prosperity in the region that will benefit Armenia, but that will also benefit the European Union.
Thank you. Tatiana Molsian, you bring a number of interesting perspectives to the table. You're from Moldova. You have worked extensively on multilateral and European cooperation. Right now, you're serving as the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. When we look at what the EU is currently doing with its sanction policy, it's closing windows for economic cooperation. Do you see other windows opening? Do you see these developments as a window of opportunity for closing these ties between Europe and Central Asia?
Thank you. Well, there is always a window of opportunity. If we don't believe in a window of opportunities, we won't be here. And here it means having this discussion, for which I'm very grateful to our host, to the minister, bringing me back to Yerevan and seeing by myself the dynamics and also the progress in not only in the country but also in the region. And there is a window of opportunity, and there is a window of opportunity when we speak not only about the developments and the political opportunities. And
Tatiana, sorry, can you move a little bit closer to the microphone?
There are these opportunities despite the political challenges. And what is important that, yes, we know there is this fatigue, and the minister mentioned of crises, of challenges, but still these many shifts in geopolitical and geoeconomic, I would say, space recently creates these opportunities that we need to seize. And it's good that today we discuss this, how we can plan ahead, the path forward, and having this foresight approach, planning in advance. And we are speaking as, about Middle East, South Caucasus, and Central Asia. And UNICEF covers actually quite a diverse region, and I can tell you it's not easy to bring common issues on the agenda when you have such a diverse membership, or when you have this very different but at the same time close region to one another. The opportunities are first of all in interconnection. So we have to create the dialogue and the connection between the countries, between the regions. We all know, I mean, any diplomatic solution without practical processes won't ensure a long-lasting peace or solution. So I think this is where we have to focus on creating that practical opportunities for interconnection, for inclusive cooperation, be it indeed transport, connectivity, trade, or environment. I think this is a very key issue where we have to focus when it comes to addressing challenges that are posed to environment, to climate change, and the fact that Armenia will be hosting the Biodiversity COP can play a specific role in that sense.
Thank you. Nigar Göksel, Turkey has been trying to use the developments both on a geopolitical level and on a regional level to strengthen its international role and influence in the region. Can Turkey play the role of an honest broker in the region?
Thank you very much. It's delightful to be in Yerevan again. Well, mediation in the sense, the narrow sense of a sort of neutral arbitrator that acts benevolently and is welcomed by both parties equally, I doubt it. But I think Turkey has some very important roles to play. In the broader sense of mediation, Ankara is already and can further carry out roles through back-channel diplomacy, which it's doing, leveraging certain assets that it has, including its location. Because it has an incentive to do so, it's really in Turkey's interest to have stability and open borders in the region. Turkish economy flourishes under those circumstances, unlike some of its rivals. And it also is popular domestically and gives it an international stature. So I think it's definitely in Turkey's interest, and Turkey's been seeing it in its interest to do so in other geographies in its proximity as well. Some have been successful, some less so, some not immediately successful, but later on paying off. So, with some recalibration and some trial and error, Turkey has found itself to be useful in various conflicts in the neighborhood. I think, as some of the other panelists have also mentioned, connectivity is one of those areas where I think Turkey's role can be significant, particularly if it collaborates with the European Union. There's some very clear shared interests between the two for win-win routes to be established, but I also see that there's a risk that they could work at cross purposes. And so one of the things that we need to focus on is to mitigate that risk, because you can see in both Turkey and some European Union countries a mistrust that if the other has a leverage, it could potentially use that leverage against the other. So making sure to be working on shared goals together and looking out for each other's interests, I think Turkey and the European Union and European partners can advance connectivity significantly. I must say, sort of a sobering note, Turkey has a lot of other issues on its plate, a lot of other conflicts that take precedence perhaps in terms of security and immediate sort of pressing need, like the PKK conflict, Syria, Iraq. Of course, Turkey has a strong alliance and solidarity with Azerbaijan, but it also, we note a pronounced appreciation in Ankara these days for Yerevan's evolving posture and pragmatism. So I definitely think there's a potential, but we shouldn't take it for granted. We need to work on it.
Thank you, Nigar. Minister Arabekian, I will come to you in a minute. I just wanted to use this opportunity to address a follow-up to Minister Mիրзոյան. Is the possible peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan also an opportunity for normalization of ties between Armenia and Turkey?
Well, to put the long story short, yes. But I also want to express my attitude to this positioning of the or this position of the official Ankara. You know, we have launched our dialogue with Turkey, having in mind and publicly saying both. I mean, we and our Turkish colleagues that this process should take place without any precondition. Now, I want to say that we are happy to see that the Turkish-Armenian dialogue is not that problematic as one could assume. And now we reached a point where the only thing that stands between now and tomorrow, where the diplomatic relations could be established between our two countries and the borders could be finally open and the connection issue could be resolved, is the non-completely finalized state of Armenian-Azerbaijani negotiations and dialogue. Although my personal attitude and my assessment is that if we succeed to have a breakthrough with Turkey, then this breakthrough would definitely have huge positive impact on Armenian-Azerbaijani normalization. But should I take the opportunity and express some other ideas as well, or I should? Okay, go ahead.
So, Minister Arabekian.
Because I have written a couple of things I want.
Wonderful. Yeah, we will come to that in a second. Minister Arabekian, so the war in Gaza has been continuing since the October 7th terror attack by Hamas. How can issues of security that we're discussing right now best be addressed in an environment that is lacking security and stability?
Thank you very much, and I'm very honored and humbled to be here today and amongst distinguished panelists. Yes, I come from an area that is plagued with insecurity and has endured a long time, several decades of insecurity, conflict, and occupation. Today, Gaza is the epic. I mean, if anyone looks at the case of Gaza, we will understand what the essence of insecurity means and what the essence of long-term insecurity without finding solutions to this insecurity, what would that result in? And we are seeing the devastation today like we have never seen before. It's impossible to talk about security vis-a-vis Israel-Palestine without speaking on the occupation. I mean, occupation is the biggest destabilizing factor of security, not only for Israel-Palestine, but for the region and probably for the world. If we want to speak on security, we need to derail this policy of territorial expansion by Israel. And territorial expansion by Israel has been clear. I mean, the world is clear about it, the international law is clear about it, and if we comply and go by international law, I think we can reach a stage where we can inject the security element. But as it is today, with this expansionist ideology, there will be absolutely no security in the Middle East, not for the Palestinians, not for the Israelis. And the first and foremost issue that we need to deal with is ending this occupation. Today, this genocidal war is the culmination of years and years of insecurities and violations of international law, of human rights, of the rights of people to self-determination. If today this issue is not taken further and dealt with once for all, we don't know when the time is appropriate. Today, now is the time. We cannot wait any longer, not for us as Palestinians, and I can also speak for the Israelis as well. There are many challenges in that regard. One of the most important challenges we need to deal with is the distrust on all sides. We have a distrust in the process of how the whole thing has been dealt with in the last 3 decades since we embarked on this political process on forging peace with Israel.
Minister Arabekian, if I may add a question. Since you're speaking about a distrust, how about the other side? How about the security of the state of Israel when there is a majority of Palestinian leadership, or a significant share at least, still questioning the right of existence of the State of Israel?
Well, today the question that needs to be asked is the security of the Palestinians. Israel exists, and there's a lot of security on the Israeli side.
But the October 7th attacks proved wrong.
Yes, the October 7th attack, I don't want to go into the reasons of the October 7th attacks, but October 7th was violent. Yes, it was violence. It has a reason. But the counter-violence exercised by the State of Israel is way disproportional to the violence that was exercised on October 7th. Violence is denounced by any perpetrator, whether it's us, the Palestinians, or the Israelis. We need to stop that cycle of violence. If anyone thinks that what is happening in Gaza today will bring peace in the future, then that's very naive, because violence only begets violence. And having 50,000 people dead, 120,000 injured, and God knows how many more under the rubble, will not bring peace, neither to Israel nor the Palestinians. The military route is not a starter. We need to sit around the table.
I'd like to bring in Minister Barrot at this point. Minister Barrot, you've recently reconfirmed France's decision to recognize the State of Palestine. This is not a consensus position in the EU. Could it be a game changer? Could it be the way to peace that Minister Arabekian is describing?
France has not announced that it has recognized Palestine.
No, it's intention.
France is chairing a UN conference with Saudi Arabia on the two-state solution, because we have this view that is very broadly shared in Europe and the rest of the world, and that is unanimous in the European Union, that there is no military solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that only a political solution can bring peace and stability to the region and ensure the security of the Israelis as the Palestinians. But right now the urgency is to cease fire, to the liberation of the hostages of Hamas that needs to be disarmed, and the unhindered access of massive humanitarian help to those that need it in Gaza. Then, and that's the topic of the conference we're working on right now, the question is, how can we preserve the perspective of this political solution? So yes, indeed, European countries, other countries from the West that have not yet recognized the State of Palestine could do so, which would help in preserving the perspective itself. But the way President Macron has been considering this decision is not only to make it a mutual decision of several European countries and Western countries, but to bring other stakeholders to also make movement in the same direction. And this means for the Palestinian Authority that we support to engage into the reform that are needed for it to be able to govern the State of Palestine once it exists. It means for Arab countries, in particular those of the region, to agree, when the war is over, to enter into a security architecture within which the State of Palestine and the State of Israel will coexist. It also means for them at some point to normalize their relationship with Israel. And then it means for Hamas to agree to a perspective of disarmament and to agree not to be associated in any manner to the future governance of Gaza. So what we're trying to do right now is to break the cycle of violence by offering a serious political perspective that is also in the interest of Israel, because it will be building the blocks guaranteeing the security of Israel moving forward. So that's the way or that's the direction we're taking. And hopefully, if all stakeholders take their part, it's a difficult part to take, It requires to take some risk, but if all stakeholders take their share of the risk, then hopefully we'll have made progress by this conference.
Thank you. Minister Mիրзоյան, back to you. Our panel's title speaks of inclusive cooperation. What would this look like for you, for the region at large?
Well, answering this question, I should probably continue where Minister Barrot stopped. By the way, we pretty much share the vision of the French ministry, the vision for the solution of Middle East. Probably the only tangible difference is that Armenia has recognized the state of Palestine, and we have the honor to have the minister participating in the panel. By the way, again, taking the opportunity, I have sent an invitation to our Israeli colleague as well, and I believe this conversation would benefit if our distinguished colleague from Israel also had decided to participate. Nevertheless, so joint engagement and mutual agreement is probably key. You know, again, this is a very simple truth. You cannot establish truth alone. You need at least the other side also wishing and being interested in this peace. That's why we are very much following and very much committed to our dialogue with our Azerbaijani colleagues. We cannot establish peace in South Caucasus without having our Azerbaijani colleagues at the table. That's why we not only continue our delimitation process, and here, Minister, you are completely right. The cooperation and peace should be based on mutual firm acknowledgement of territorial integrity. If you violate the borders, then the whole concept collapses. That's why we can discuss not only the peace treaty, which is again a simple, more or less simple document. No single peace treaty can regulate all the spheres of life or relations between any two countries. That's why also that we discuss a future possible cooperation and transit routes crossing Azerbaijan and also Armenia. So cooperation and engagement is indeed key.
Yeah, Bill.
Yes, I want to bounce back on what I just said, because look at the geographical position of Armenia. It is basically a crossroads, or it can be a crossroads, but it is a landlocked country that is located in between two regions where two of the largest crises in the world are happening. And so either we manage to come up with peace and political solutions to these major regional conflicts that affect the entire world, in which case the peace crossroads that Armenia has designed and implemented will serve as a formidable sort of conducer to growth and prosperity for this South Caucasus region, but much broader for Europe, for the Middle East, and for South Asia. If instead we're not able to bring back peace in those regions, and I'm thinking, of course, the Middle East and Gaza on the one hand, and Ukraine and Russia on the other hand, and then countries like Armenia will be paying the cost of those tensions arising from the lack of respect for the principles of territorial integrity. That's why what's happening in our neighborhood, in our direct neighborhood in Ukraine, is so important. It's not only the security of Europe and the European Union that is at stake. It's this very principle of intangibility of borders that leads us to think that depending on the way the Russian war of aggression on Ukraine will be solved, this will have huge consequences for the entire continent, and including for Armenia. And that's why we're supporting Armenia in these testing times. They came with a total of 150 million worth of financing support for, in particular, support for the infrastructure projects that the government is implementing now to make sure, or to sort of create the conditions of cooperation through connectivity infrastructure, which we think is the wisest way to go.
Thank you very much. Tatiana Moltzian, if you look at the project that the ECE is currently implementing, we've heard a lot about transit and connectivity as two main aspects. Can you share with us a number of developments and projects that give you hope that economic cooperation will provide the path to peace in the region?
I will continue on the message from Minister Barrot on the connectivity, on the importance of investing in infrastructure to create this routes and crossroads for peace, as they are called, because this is really essential if we are talking about dialogue. You need connectivity, you need access, you need interaction between people in order to build dialogue. This is why investments in infrastructure are important, in particular everything that would facilitate connectivity. At the same time, what we are focused very much now at UNICE is to make sure that these investments are in projects or programs that are resilient. And when I'm speaking about resilience, is both, well, political, which is more difficult, but economic resilience, and also social and environment resilience. Because we can invest a lot. One day we have a flooding, we have a crisis, and all of this investment is compromised. So this is one key area where we work very closely, including with the countries from the region, but specifically with Armenia as well, to see how we can support this development of corridors. One key aspect is the digitalization. These days we cannot advance without looking at the technological progress. Otherwise it's, we are outdated, if I can say like this. We are not relevant if we are not investing enough in creating all and using all the available tools that are provided by technological advancement. So this is key, and this is a message for everyone that supports their region, their country, and the wider, let's say, interregional cooperation. This is key. But I wanted also to refer to one more, because a lot was mentioned about lack of trust, no confidence between the department. And here's where I see the biggest contribution that we can do, and in particular from the UN, but let's say a regional commission with a more sectoral economic view. It's to help confidence building, but from an angle which is not an immediate obvious one. And I will give the example of transboundary water cooperation. Yes, one of the regions under focus, Central Asia. I mean, for many years we've been working, but recently we have seen a lot of progress when it comes to addressing the challenges related to sharing common rivers, lakes, groundwaters. And some of the mistrust and misconception have been addressed by just applying some very technical, without political, but really technical instruments that are available there. And I think this is also relevant for this region and actually globally. And I know that France has this as a part of its external policy, foreign policy, to really support countries globally, including for this One Water Summit that was last year. To look at solutions of confidence building measures, not the usual one that you would suspect, but through cooperation like this, because sometimes tensions are created without real ground. Yes, you need some technical solution, you need some very practical tools, and here's where UN and instruments like UN Water Convention can be very practical and applicable. So I would encourage to use more of those available tools.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
I'm sorry to intervene. It's not my turn to speak, but I mostly, of course, agree with Madame Molchan. But if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I am mistaken, but if I'm not mistaken, I heard Madame Molchan saying that there is always a window of opportunity. Unfortunately, that's not the case. That's not the case. We have been working hard to speak about normalization of relations with Azerbaijan, with Turkey, deepening our relations with EU, and I'm bringing our own examples, but I am sure that everyone has her own example in this sense. And if we do not deliver very tangible results, then this momentum would be lost. And I think that not only 1 year, not even 2 or 5 years will be needed, but probably a change of generation would be needed, at least in our case, in this region, to rebuild or again to re-establish this dialogue, this cooperation, the potential of which we do have with Azerbaijan, with Turkey, and we are really very, very close. So this is probably the only aspect, the only idea where I think it is necessary to express disagreement.
Nigar Göksel, what are your thoughts on the window of opportunity versus the sense of urgency in the Armenian and Azerbaijani peace negotiations, and also the normalization of ties with Turkey?
Thank you. No, I agree with Minister Mիրզոյան. I think there is a time sensitivity because of both the regional and local dynamics. And the conversation made me think that these sort of transport routes and cooperation and whatnot, the sort of connectivity, it's like a little bit like a marriage. So you get interlinked and dependent. And sometimes I'll hear in Turkey and Azerbaijan that, what if Armenia becomes a pawn of an external actor that's sort of adversary to these countries? And I guess what I usually say is isolating or excluding or sidelining Armenia makes that likelihood much more. So it does take a leap of faith to become linked together via infrastructure, but I do think that there's a window of opportunity on that point. I agree. I would also like to sort of point out that it will matter how Turkey, what kind of a place Turkey finds for itself, or the Europe finds for Turkey in the evolving strategic architecture, security architecture that's developing in Europe. I think whether if a cooperation on security defense basis can be strengthened between Turkey and its European partners, I think this will have positive spillovers in terms of the potential for Turkey and European partners to work together in this region as well. Yes, I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Arabikian, Tatiana Molsian mentioned the possibility of using shared water resources as a measure of trust building and deepening ties. Water is, of course, a major issue in the Middle East. Do you see it as an opportunity to build trust among conflict parties?
I think there are lots of opportunities to build trust, but first and foremost, we need to have both parties coming into a peace process with a genuine intent, with an end game of resolving the issue, which means ending the occupation. We have to learn from negotiations rounds of the past. We have embarked on a peace process more than 3 decades ago. And for me, as a Palestinian, I don't see that this process gave us anything, but it has emboldened the occupation. We have more settlements today. We have an apartheid regime. Some people don't like to hear it, but I live it. So I know the reality of apartheid. The genuine intent means that both parties agree on certain parameters. They agree on the end game. They have a framework, and they tell us exactly what will happen from step 1 to step 5 to reach that end goal. Without that, we will go into a cycle of negotiations, trust building, and a cycle of violence that will get us nowhere.
Thank you. Minister Barrault?
Yes, thank you. In theory, cooperation infrastructure are conducive to peace. Why? Because when you start trading with another country, the cost of going at war goes up. And so you're going to be discouraged from choosing the path of violence over negotiation and diplomacy. But of course, this is very theoretical, because sometimes you're stuck And you cannot decide on your own that you're going to, or in many instances, it's very difficult to decide on your own that you're going to build cooperation or infrastructure with a partner country that is not willing to engage into such a discussion. But sometimes unilateral moves can make an example, which is the beginnings of the European Union. So we had World War II. We were 5 years after World War II, and France, who was amongst the winners of the war, was looking at Germany, among the losers of the war, recovering much faster from the war than France was. So there was this temptation in France at the time to make Germany pay once again, and thereby getting sort of dragged into the same logics that led us to World War I and then to World War II and so on and so forth. And then my distant predecessor, Robert Schuman, he had this idea, which was to make a unilateral offer to Germany to pool steel and coal that were at the heart of the competition between France and Germany. And of course, Germany seized the offer when it was made unilaterally. What I'm saying is not that this is going to work in all instances, that is going to work in the Great Lakes, that is going to work in the Middle East, that is going to work here in, between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. What I'm saying is that there is always some hope that when you engage in good faith on the path for cooperation, by sending credible signals like the peace crossroads of the Armenian government, then you're not wasting your time, because you never know, at some point the offer will be seized and you will have done good because you will have anchored the relationship for a long time on solid basis that will guarantee peace and prosperity rather than never-ending conflicts and wars.
Thank you. Minister Arabikian, are there lessons that you can take away from the Armenian-Azerbaijani negotiations at the moment for the Middle East?
Yes, I think Armenia and Azerbaijan have come to terms that the military route will bring them nothing but more destruction. And I think it's time for Israel and Palestine to think the same, because the future means respecting the integrity of both, respecting the presence of both in that area of land, and respecting the right of self-determination for the Palestinian people, as well as respecting the right of Israel to live in peace and security. But for Israel to live in peace and security, it has to respect its neighbors and the integrity of its neighbors. We have extended our arms on forging peace with Israel. And we have recognized the state of Israel in 1988, and we have embarked on this peace process. We are ready to continue that process so that Israel and Palestine can live side by side in peace and security with mutual respect and trust for the future. Our children need that.
Thank you. Coming back to the region and our host, Minister Mirzoyan, we're currently witnessing a struggle between pro-European forces in the region and Eurosceptic or Euro-hostile forces. What does the region need in order to strengthen its ties with Europe and its outlook towards Europe?
Well, you're putting me in a very difficult position, because now I have to speak also about, and in place, if I may, I don't know, or I express my ideas about Azerbaijan's perceptions, about Georgia's perceptions. For sure, I can speak definitely for Armenia. So we just adopted a law saying that the government of Armenia should adopt the policy of European integration and policy of becoming a member state of the European Union. So we are in the middle of a process of significantly deepening our ties and integration with the European Union. But also, as you said, there are also Eurosceptics here as well. I was referring to this situation during my previous intervention, saying that there is huge expectation in Armenia, within Armenian society. So we have democracy here, We are diversifying our ties with our international partners. We are launching several programs and mechanisms. We do have a SIPA agreement. We have a new partnership agenda with the European Union, but also there is huge expectation. And again, this is a bilateral, process. We can have expectations, but maybe that's not the case, and that's not the readiness from the European side. So we should understand where our visions coincide, and if they do coincide, how to act, how to plan our joint tomorrow. For now, there are huge expectations within Armenian society, and if these expectations are not fulfilled by our government, by our EU colleagues, then we will have a huge frustration. And this is a region where the feelings are very important, historically and traditionally. And if these expectations lead to not fulfillment but to frustration, then again the momentum would be lost, and I can hardly imagine when we can restart the process again.
Minister Barrot, close us off, please. How can the EU prevent from creating disappointment among populations like we're starting to witness this in the Western Balkans, for example?
Yeah, so first let me look at the glass half full rather than seeing it as half empty. There is a lot of appetite for the European Union right now. In fact, I think it is even underpriced because it is criticized, a little bit like, the way you spin your question. European Union is creating discouragement among candidate countries and so on. But it is right now looked as a safe haven for predictability, stability, the rule of law, democracy, and freedom. Because everywhere else in the world, you're seeing some form of backsliding one way or another, or unpredictability, or instability, or uncertainty. And the European Union is an antidote to this evolution of the world that is not good for business, that is not good for people. So Armenia is not alone in its aspiration to join the EU, because joining the EU is not something you do for the money, right? You do it because you crave for democracy and freedom. When you're a candidate country, what's the toughest part? It's not the economic convergence or the social convergence. The toughest part is to align with the EU standards in terms of respect of the rule of law, democracy, freedom of the press, independence of research, independence of justice. This is a treasure that is going to see its value increase at a fast pace in the next few years. And so Armenia is not alone among countries that are looking at the EU as a guarantee for democracy, guarantee for freedom moving forward. Now, of course, as I said, this is a difficult process. It's a difficult process to reach the EU standards in terms of the rule of law. And so it's taking some time, and sometimes people are getting frustrated. And this is what we've seen in some countries in the Western Balkans. We are going to see in the next few years, in the very near future, some countries from the Western Balkan reach the end of their accession process. I think that Montenegro is making a very significant process. Albania is making great progress. And they will serve as examples for the other countries of the region that are willing to follow suit. But I agree also that it's the responsibility of the EU to work with candidate countries to facilitate the public acceptability of the efforts that need to be made until the accession is reached. And that's the spirit in which we've been supporting the European Peace Facility for Armenia. That's the spirit in which we've entered into a discussion on visa liberalization. And that's the spirit in which we're going to facilitate, if indeed Armenia becomes a candidate country, its gradual accession to some of the dimensions of the single market, so that the citizens, but also the authorities in Armenia, realize that their efforts will not be in vain and that there are tangible benefits to the accession, and that even before the whole process is completed. So in summary, the EU is currently underpriced, but countries that are facing huge threat in their neighborhood know the value of democracy and freedom, and that's the reason why they're looking in the direction of the EU. The times we're living through, where we're seeing some more instability, more uncertainty, is giving even more value to the EU accession process, but it's also the responsibility of the EU to make sure that candidate countries deserve special treatment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrault. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our discussion, and obviously we were unable to have an exhaustive debate on the huge topic. Unfortunately, we won't have time for further discussion. We will move on to the next aspect in the program, and let me thank our excellent panelists for their lively discussion. I hope that this debate was the beginning of many fruitful exchanges. Thank you very much. So I hope that this will be the beginning of many fruitful exchanges on this important topic. Thank you very much for attending this debate.
Gambling with World War III.
Nous rentrons dans une nouvelle ère.
The world is changing, but there is no consensus on the extension and also on the